Hi, my name is Jared Mello, and this is a special episode today of Mello Mentoring. Today I have a guest, and his name is David Richter. He is a Republican candidate for Congress out of New Jersey's 3rd District, so it's going to be definitely a privilege to speak with him here. But before I get into today's video, I think it's very important at this time to be supporting small businesses. And right now, the federal government might not be doing the best it can to get loans to the small businesses and people who need it, but I think it's up to us citizens to try to really support them in their time of need. And I have a friend, his name is Nick Shoemaker. He has a business that fixes windshield repair. And so if you have a crack in your windshield that's less than 6 inches, please reach out to the link I'm going to include in the description with his contact information, and he would definitely appreciate the business during this tough time for everyone. But without further ado, I'm going to get right into the conversation here with Mr. Richter, again, Republican candidate for Congress. So how are you today, sir?
Good. Doing very well, Jared. Thank you.
Awesome.
Please call me David.
David? Will do. So David, how has this corona stuff been affecting you recently here?
Well, it's been affecting my family, obviously. We're hunkered down in our home. I'm married to my wife, Michelle. We have 4 daughters, 4 teenage daughters, and they're doing school from home. They're learning online. And it's been, we're going a little stir crazy, frankly. But I have the feeling that we're at the point now where we're coming out of this thing. I think the worst is behind us, and I think things are getting better from here. It certainly impacted our campaign. I've been off the campaign trail for the last 6 weeks, but doing as much as we can, over the phone, by social media, and trying to get my name out there, because this is the first time I run for public office. So we've lost quite a few weeks, but compared to what everybody else is facing and the health issues, it's a minor inconvenience.
I got you. And you've grown up in the district here, correct? You've lived in, is it Toms River here and Willingboro?
No, I grew up in Willingboro in
Okay.
Burlington County, and then I worked there for more than 20 years, working in a family business in Willingboro and in Evesham. So I spent a majority of my life in the 3rd District, and it's more than any place else in the world is my home district.
Because Evesham's where I live now too, so Evesham's a nice place. And you have a lot of education behind you too. I saw that you had 5 degrees right now.
Yeah, I'm a little bit of an education addict, and had 2 bachelor's degrees from the University of Pennsylvania, and stayed there for law school. And then later in life, in my 40s, I went back and got a master's degree at Oxford in business. And just recently, I went back to the Harvard Kennedy School and got a master's degree in government to sort of prepare me not only to run for Congress, but to serve in Congress.
Awesome.
After I hopefully win the race.
Absolutely. And to me, education really is so important. It's one of the things I think we should be focusing on, especially with today's youth, because the education, that's going to determine where we're going to be 10 years, 20 years, 30 years down the line is where the education is. And so you've also been the CEO of a business, correct?
Yeah, I was very fortunate. My dad had started a company back in the 70s, a small consulting firm that had a lot of success, built it up to about 300 people. But in the mid-90s, at the time I was an attorney in New York City, his business started failing, and I gave up the practice of law to come back to South Jersey, join the business, and help turn it around. We really saved it. It was on the verge of bankruptcy for several years. And when I left the company 22 years later, I was the CEO. We'd grown the business to 4,300 employees, and it was a public company with offices all over the world.
It was fascinating to me. I was reading about that in your bio, and I'm always curious, what is your leadership style? How would you say that you effectively led that business and helped it to grow the way it did?
Well, I think one thing is you have to, especially in a professional service business like Hill International was and is, you got to focus on your clients. You've got to keep them happy. You've got to be the absolute best in the world that you can possibly be, which means you have to hire the best people. And so we were very good at being able to attract and retain the best professionals in the construction industry. And as far as a management style, I think you build the best possible team you can. You give them the resources they need to succeed, and then you get out of their way. And I apply the same style of management in politics as I did in business.
Awesome.
Put together a great campaign team who are working hard and doing great things for us. And I think that's going to reflect itself on Election Day.
I think it's very important for people to have practical experience leading people. I think that's something that a lot of politicians don't quite have anymore. They don't have that business experience, the experience of actually doing something in the private sector. They don't have that experience actually being successful. So it's really important, I think, in the public servants, which of course a politician would be, to have that skill. And I'm old school though, where I feel like the old gentleman farmer thing is something I think we should try to be getting back to, where people actually have their businesses, they have the stuff they do, that they serve for a little while, treat it like a public servant position, and then maybe go back.
I couldn't agree with you more. And frankly, I'm running against two opponents, one in the Republican primary and one in the general election, who have spent their entire lives in the public sector and were feeding off the public sector. And I spent my career in the private sector, meeting a payroll, paying taxes, building a business, creating jobs, thousands of jobs at our company. And I think those skills are incredibly important, because one of the most important things government has to do is promote the economy, have it growing. It creates opportunity for people, creates jobs for people. And if you don't know how the private sector operates, it's going to be real tough to serve in Congress.
I could definitely see that. I think the people are ready for that too. The people are tired of the Nancy Pelosi's and the other kind of career politicians that have been there for 20, 30 years. I think it'd be important to have people, the legislators, be a part of the world that they have been legislating for.
There's no question. We should not have career politicians.
Absolutely.
And it's one of the reasons why early in the campaign I advocated for a constitutional amendment to put term limits in place for members of Congress. A 12-year limit in the House and a 12-year limit in the Senate. And even though I'm running for the House, I'm happy to live by those terms as long as everybody else is, because you just literally should not, like Nancy Pelosi, be in Congress for 30, 40 years.
Right.
It just doesn't make any sense.
Now, I think some of her videos, I think she's either been posting on TikTok or maybe Instagram, is kind of showing how out of touch she is, where even Democrat stations are pointing it out and saying how she's ogling over her best versions of ice cream that she has in her $12,000 refrigerator. Meanwhile, she appears completely socially out of touch with Mr. Small Business Owner or Mrs. Small Business Owner, or someone who has not been able to get things like unemployment or any stimulus yet. And here she is with her, I'm so grateful for ice cream. And she just is just out of touch.
She is the perfect example of a limousine liberal. And, her and her husband are worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And to give, a tour of her kitchen, which is probably more expensive than most people's homes, at a time when people are suffering and are out of work and are sick, to me was totally tone deaf. And it's one of the reasons why I'm looking forward to being in Congress next January, so I can watch that gavel being taken away from her and handed to a Republican.
Absolutely. Now, here's another question I wanted to ask you about. So we're obviously in the middle of this coronavirus pandemic. What would be your message right now, if you were the congressman, to the New Jersey people? Because in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, this is not speaking for you, in my opinion, it's being so overblown right now. People are having a hard time with the facts. I've heard like 99% of people are going to be fine. 99% of the people aren't going to have it. But yet, you turn on the news and things, and all of a sudden, all you see is catastrophe. And they make sure they make a point to accentuate any younger person who has had it, especially if the younger person who has died, even if they are the exception to the rule, not quite the rule. So what would you say to the New Jersey people about the situation they're in right now?
Well, I can tell you one thing about the media, and this goes back a long way, but good news doesn't sell newspapers.
Yeah.
Bad news does, and it's the same on TV and with cable news. So they're accentuating the negative, but this is a very serious health crisis, and I think government has acted appropriately and quickly and treated it with the seriousness it deserves, because there are a lot of people being infected. It's over 1 million people now in the U.S. People are dying from it. It's a very serious health crisis. So I think that's gone well. What I think that we need to do is recognize that there's also an economic crisis going on. We've tried to shut down our entire economy for the last 6 weeks, at least as much as the government decides can be shut down, and it's having an incredibly negative effect. And I think that the sooner we get back to normal, the better. There are businesses, small businesses, and the 3rd District is full of small and family-owned businesses that really drive the economy.
Absolutely.
And those businesses are at risk of shutting down and never coming back. Those are the jobs at those companies are going to be lost and lost forever, unless we act quickly and start to get the economy moving again. Now, I think that we're at the point now, and it's today, April 29th, I think we're at the point where things are absolutely getting better. You can see that curve starting to come down, and we need to ease out of this as quickly as we can. And some of it, it's incredibly arbitrary about what's been shut down and what hasn't been. Hardware stores can stay open, liquor stores can stay open, but clothing stores can't. Some types of stores can operate, some are prohibited from operating, and it seems incredibly random and arbitrary. And certainly the way Governor Murphy's been treating this whole situation, I think, has been very, very negative. I can't tell you how many people start calling him Emperor Murphy, like he's the controller of all of our lives, when he needs to remember that he works for us. And that's something I'm never going to forget in Congress, that I work for the people. Just probably the best example is closing down the state parks. There was probably one or several large groups of people congregating in one park one day, and he decides that every state park in New Jersey needs to close. Now, I can't imagine anything more counterproductive, especially when people are stuck in their homes and going stir crazy like my family has been.
Right.
We've been out hiking and walking the dog and biking, and those things are good and healthy and should continue, especially as the weather improves. And for him to continue to keep all the state parks closed, to me, is just idiotic and counterproductive.
Because I saw he was going through a 6-point checklist where he thinks that we need to have a certain amount of testing in order to even think about opening up, and we might not even get that testing for 3 months. And to me, that is unacceptable. And I don't know what he plans on telling the small business owners and the other people who don't have unemployment or stimulus. What do you tell those people if you're not going to open up this state for 3 more months? How do they survive? How do they function?
That can't possibly happen. I think we're a couple of weeks away from the state beginning to reopen it in a big way. I think we're probably a couple months away from getting back to some degree of normalcy. But you've got some things, bars, restaurants, sporting events, concerts. I don't think people are going to want to be shoulder to shoulder with large groups of people for a while until this thing is clearly gone.
Very true.
And out of our system. So that's going to take some time. But people need to shop. People need jobs. People need to work. They can put off their rent for a month or two, but 3-4 months is just not going to happen.
Right.
So when you're talking about the percentages of people that are being infected, it's about 99% of people in New Jersey don't have the coronavirus. But you're talking about a state like California, 99.9% of them don't have the coronavirus. How long do you keep a state like that locked down for? It just doesn't make any sense. Because New Jersey was one of the first and hardest hit states, I think we're also going to be one of the first to come out of it. And that's, you can see evidence of that happening already.
Oh, good. Because I think what I see is people having a very difficult time with recognizing that the way they are experiencing this virus is not the only way to experience it. There's people that say things like, if you don't take every single precaution in the absolute world, you're just a terrible person. And they don't see the other side of the small businesses and the people who are unemployed. They only see the virus side. And maybe some people at the small business side, they don't see the virus side either as much. But I think it's very important to distinguish that both sides of that equation are true. Both sides are correct, and both sides are big problems that actually do need to be addressed. And just because you address one side does not mean you're a monster or a terrible person. It just means that you're a thinking person that actually needs to take them seriously and know that as a leader, you'd be responsible for handling both sides, not just one side of the equation, right, but both sides.
Yeah, I agree with that. And the situations that are most difficult to resolve are the ones where both sides are right. Is this a very dangerous, fatal disease? Yes. Do we need to do things to slow its growth and to eventually stop it? Yes. Do we need to get the economy moving again and give people jobs and allow people to pay their rent and their mortgages? Yes. We need to do all those things. I think New Jersey's reaction under Governor Murphy has been a little too draconian. I think he needs to recognize that the people are starting to fight back against some of the executive orders that he's put in place that don't make sense. And I think that's only going to continue to grow louder the longer this thing lasts. I see May as the month where we come out of this thing. I think certainly by June and July, we're back to some reasonable degree of normalcy. And I'm doing everything I can to promote that.
Good. It always makes me think of the two people looking at the other end of the 6, where one side thinks it's a 9, one side thinks it's a 6. They're both correct, instead of thinking the other side's just all wrong. It's like, no, two people can be correct and have a different viewpoint on the same issue. And I think that's important to distinguish. But on to other New Jersey politicians, Mr. Andy Kim, the 3rd District's congressman now. What do you think about him?
Well, obviously, given the fact that I'm running against him, I don't think too highly of him. Andy is somebody that came into this district 2 years ago. moved back here from Washington, D.C., where he had spent much of his career, or almost all of his career. And he was kind of a blank slate, but he caught the blue wave in 2018. There was no question during a president's first midterm, it tends to go the other way. Democratic turnout was through the roof. And you really couldn't talk much about Andy Kim because nobody knew what he stood for or what he was about. He did make a couple promises to the voters in the 3rd District, promises he broke. He promised he would vote against Nancy Pelosi as Speaker. And then, of course, when he got down to D.C., the first vote he made was to elect her as Speaker of the House. And he also said he'd be a moderate voice for South Jersey. And he goes down to D.C. and he's voted with Nancy Pelosi 98% of the time. He's joined the Progressive Caucus, which are not moderate Democrats. Those are the far left radical Democrats in the party. In fact, so radical, 60% of the Democrats in the House refused to join it. And 100% of Democrats in the U.S. Senate have refused to join it. The only senator that's a member is Bernie Sanders. So that tells you what that group stands for. And Andy Kim is with them caucusing on their issues. Not only Bernie Sanders, but the whole squad. AOC,
AOC,
Elon Omar, and their friends are all in the Progressive Caucus, and you can't make any claim to be a moderate Democrat when you're hanging out in that group. So I think he's misled the voters of the 2nd District. I think that in 2020, especially with President Trump at the top of the ticket, you're going to see Republican turnout through the roof, and I think he's going to have a difficult time defending what he's done. President Trump in 2016 won this district by over 6 points. And Andy Kim goes down to Washington, D.C. and votes to impeach the president on, as we saw, pretty flimsy evidence that was quickly dispelled by the U.S. Senate. We've gotten past that waste of time. The investigations and the impeachment hearings and everything that Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats in Congress have done to impede the president trying to make this a better country, to make America great again and to keep America great, I think has been just a complete waste of time. And I think the American people have seen that for the last 2 years, and that's why I think the president's going to get reelected, and why I'm running for Congress, not only to help him get reelected, but to support his agenda during his 2nd term.
Okay. Now, I know Andy Kim, I was disappointed that he did not keep his promise to have monthly town hall meetings. That was one of the things I heard that he'd said he was going to do, and I don't think there has been any of those as of late. But also, I've heard that, so basically right now, I'm not sure how this is going to go upcoming in November. Is the Republicans going to come out in full force, like you said? Because, like you said, Andy Kim, he did ride that blue wave. That anyone who voted for a Democrat in 2018 in the interims, it was basically just a vote against Trump. And that's, as far as I could tell, that's what it was. But what do you think is going to happen in 2020? You think Republicans are going to come out in force because they're defending all the attacks against Trump, defending all the Mueller report, the Russia investigation, the failed impeachment attempt? So what do you think is going to occur?
Well, now Andy Kim has a record to run on. And even with the blue wave at his back in 2018, he only won the race 50-49. This is a historically Republican district. The last Democrat to get reelected to this district was in the 19th century. That tells you he doesn't have a very good wind at his back. But I think that with the right candidate, which I think is me, with President Trump at the top of the ticket, I think he's going to win the district again. This year. In fact, I think he's going to win it by more than 6 points. With Andy's record in Congress, which has not been a positive one, and one he's going to have to defend to the voters of this district, and having done things that he said he wouldn't do, and not done things he said he was going to do, he's going to have a real tough time facing the voters in November.
I think so.
And I'm looking forward to representing this district in Congress, and hopefully for a long time.
So I think one thing the Democrats don't realize is every attack they make on Trump is actually making his supporters, their resolve, that much stronger. Now, me personally, I'm more neutral on Trump, but just being neutral means that I find myself defending him much more than I would be someone else, because
there are very few people that are neutral on the president.
I actually am, because I think that, yeah, he says some things that might be a little outlandish, and a lot of people say things like, we just wish he would not be on Twitter, and I understand all those things. But to me, it's as long as his policies do not become crazy and ridiculous, there's not really anything I could say. And if you look at the Democrats, progressives, or liberals' arguments against him, they're almost all feelings-based of something like, oh, I can't stand that he says this, I can't stand that he said that, did you hear what he said about bleach, did you hear what he said about Lysol? And it's like, well, there's no policies with any of those things. You just get annoyed feeling what you see and what you hear when you listen to him. And it's like, if you can get past that, which I think it takes a certain level of emotional maturity to do, but a lot of people just can't do it. So that's why I say I am neutral. I would probably vote for him over Biden, but I'm not I wouldn't say I'm like a Trump flag waving person, but that's just my personal opinion about it.
I think Donald Trump was exactly what this country needed at exactly the right time. First of all, anybody that kept Hillary Clinton out of the White House, gets my 100% support. But I think what we needed was a political outsider, someone that hadn't been a career politician, someone that had worked in the private sector and knew how business worked, knows how the economy works, knows how jobs are created, knows how to get things built. He was a master builder. He was exactly the right person to take leadership of this country at a time where it really needed it. We had 8 years of Obama in office. I think the country needed to be rebuilt. I think the economy needed to be pushed forward. And he did a fantastic job in the economy. And the policies that his administration has put forward have been fantastic for the country. I feel like I'm the same kind of person. I'm a political outsider. I'm someone that spent my career in the business world. I understand what needs to get done. I want to try and do everything I can in Congress over the next 4 years to help the president's legislative agenda get passed. Hopefully, we'll be back down there with a Republican majority. That Nancy Pelosi won't have that gavel again because she did nothing positive with it.
Right.
And then we can really get some amazing things accomplished in the next 4 years.
I think the people are ready. The people are ready for political outsiders. Donald Trump proved that in 2016. And people want to move away from that corporate slash just the establishment type people. They want something new. They want fresh. They want something that's going to be a little different than the status quo. And I think that's what Trump has provided. And it sounds like that's what you're going to try to provide as well. So maybe we could talk a little more about, if you get into Washington, what would be some of your policies? What would you like to try to get accomplished once there?
Well, I think the most important thing has been, and certainly in a presidential year will be, the focus of the people is the economy.
Right.
And especially given how much it's been ravaged in the last 2 months with the coronavirus epidemic. We need to get business back in business. We need to be creating jobs. We need them to be paying taxes because government's going to run out of money soon. The issues that are most important to me tend to be economic ones because they're the ones that impact America's families the most, particularly here in the 3rd District. I want to be an advocate for small business. And the 3rd District is full of small businesses, particularly along the shore. You've got just, I think 60-something% of jobs in the 3rd District are with companies that have fewer than 50 employees. And so how those businesses do is very important. ExxonMobil doesn't need me in Congress. Citigroup doesn't need me in Congress. I want to be there to support a free enterprise, pro-capitalism kind of person naturally. But small businesses don't really have advocates. They don't have lobbyists. They don't have anybody helping them deal with all the ways government can harm them and not help them. And I want to make that the focus. I want to make job creation in the 3rd District a focus. I want to make infrastructure investment because my background working at a construction management firm, helping to build public works and infrastructure all over the world, I think those skills can be applied working in Congress, helping bring back federal dollars to South Jersey. One of the big issues we have is that New Jersey is dead last in the country among the states for how much money we get back from the federal government relative to the tax dollars that we send down there. And when that money does come back, it all goes to North Jersey. South Jersey gets the short end of the stick. And I want to be there fighting for South Jersey.
I think that's extremely important. I think a lot of people will certainly agree with you about that because certainly at some points, New Jersey seems like 2 states. It seems like North Jersey and their interests, and then South Jersey is kind of just the redheaded, ugly stepchild.
It's an afterthought to a lot of people in Trenton and,
yes,
and certainly in Washington, D.C.
Absolutely. And so I think the people want someone who's going to stand up for South Jersey's interest. And I think the fact that you are for small businesses like that, especially right now, that's going to be huge. And is there anything you would want to say to small business owners right now that maybe are having a hard time, they're struggling, and they don't really know what to do? Like they don't know what's going to come next?
I can tell them in general, if you feel like there's nobody that speaks to you, that there's nobody in Washington or Trenton that's fighting for you, I'm the candidate for entrepreneurs, for small business owners, for family business owners who want somebody who cares about them and their employees and their customers and will fight for you in Congress. That person is absolutely me.
Okay. And what about infrastructure-wise? You said you had your construction business. What would be your plans for infrastructure throughout the state of New Jersey, especially in comparison to how it is now?
Well, there's a tremendous need, and it's not just in the third district, but statewide. You've got
Right.
the tunnel that Amtrak needs to be built under the Hudson River. You've got 55 down in Cape May County and Cumberland County that needs to be extended. But you've got infrastructure, highways, bridges, coastal restoration, coastal protection, environmental cleanup, all sorts of things that need to be done in the third district. And the best thing about infrastructure is those jobs can't be outsourced.
Right.
If you're building something, it has to be built where it resides, where it is. And so you can't build a bridge in China and fly it over here and drop it into place.
Very true. Very true.
So those are locally created jobs. And then the infrastructure, once it's built, throws off development because you'll see more businesses come into Burlington and Ocean counties. You'll see more jobs created locally, and those jobs will be here for a very long time.
I agree with that, and that's why I agree with Trump's tariffs. That was his whole point. He didn't want to have these jobs outsourced to other countries. He wanted things made here. He wanted things to improve our GDP. And as far as I could tell, what China did with them actually is probably going to work. They agreed to spend, I don't know, it was 200 billion or 200 million, I can't remember, but they had actually agreed to buy things here, which is great. Now,
I think Trump's done a great job with pushing for better trade deals, taking a hard line with our trading partners. Naturally, I'm a free trader.
Right.
Trade is good. Trade is the source of our wealth. But you need to deal with other countries on a fair and equal basis. And certainly with China, that hasn't been the case. With a lot of countries, that hasn't been the case. So he's taken a hard position. He's put tariffs in place. It's forced our trading partners to come to the bargaining table, renegotiating NAFTA to the new USMCA, the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement. I think is going to create more jobs going forward than it did in the past. And I think that's part of the reasons why he got elected. You saw a Republican do very well in the Midwest among voters that traditionally had been Democrats, had been voting Democratic. And I think that in 2020 that's going to repeat itself.
Okay. Now, I think the other thing you had an opinion on was our national debt here in America and New Jersey's debt. What were your thoughts on that?
Well, my thoughts are that we've been spending our way toward insolvency for decades. And, frankly, neither party takes a real hard line on spending. But Congress's number one job is taxing and spending and being the purse strings holder for the federal government. All spending bills have to come out of the House, not the Senate. So there's a tremendous ability to control spending that, for the last couple of decades, certainly for my entire life, hasn't been there. And you see the result. We've got a $23 trillion national debt. That's going to go up dramatically, especially with all the spending that's happened this year in response to coronavirus. But even after that's over, going forward, our country continues to spend $1 trillion every year more than it brings in. We are creating a national debt that is going to be more and more problematic for our children and our grandchildren to pay off or deal with. We are undermining their economic lives. And we need to do everything we can to minimize the wasteful spending that our government does every year. We are certainly not undertaxed. Most Democrats, their answer for that was, sure, let's raise taxes to pay it off. They're happy to balance the budget off the taxpayers. But our taxes are already too high. I'm convinced our taxes need to come down further. I think the 2017 Tax Act was great. It was a great start. It did a great job of cutting taxes for business. I think we need to further cut taxes for individuals, particularly the middle class. And I'm going to be fighting for lower taxes in Congress as well. I think we need to make sure that America is on solid economic footing. And where our national debt has grown to, I don't feel comfortable that that's the case. I know, and a lot of people agree with me.
Right. I think one of the issues with the national debt is people don't feel any pushback or pain because of it. It's just you spend, and then we don't feel any negativity. If we were to feel some of the consequences of our actions in form of having to actually pay it back, I think people would be a little more hesitant with actually just throwing money out there, right? But instead, they can spend and do whatever, and then there's no negative repercussions.
Like I said, our children and our grandchildren are going to feel those repercussions.
Yes.
No question about it. And one of the problems is you've got congressmen and congresswomen that are elected every 2 years. So they think short term.
Right.
Their biggest concern is what's happening this year and how do I get re-elected next year. So it's really difficult when you've got a problem that is a decade or 2 or 3 away from a real calamity, getting any attention for dealing with that from Congress people that have a 24-month mindset.
Right. And that's why I think, like you said before, the term limits are so important. I know I've worked with Brian Fitzpatrick in Pennsylvania. He put a self-imposed term limit on himself. So did his older brother, his late older brother Mike at this point. But it's great that they did that. It meant that they're actually putting the interests of the people above their own personal interests, which I think is really amazing. But I guess in closing here, is there any other thoughts that you'd have to communicate to the people of New Jersey in regards to the virus, in regards to your platform and things you'd like to accomplish in Washington?
Yeah, a lot of things. Well, first of all, obviously, stay safe, stay healthy, keep your families healthy, your children, and everybody in your families. We are definitely coming out of this. I think the world is getting back to some degree of normalcy. I don't think even 6 months from now it's going to be like it was 6 months ago, but things are absolutely getting better. Certainly the stock market is starting to recover. I think people are starting to go back to work carefully and smartly, and when they do, they're being careful as far as wearing masks and gloves when they need to. But stay positive, stay confident. The economy is going to bounce back. We are not going into a second Great Depression. A couple months of this is not going to permanently undermine our economy. But I can tell you one thing, if you want a strong economy, 4 more years of Donald Trump will absolutely deliver that. I'm going to do everything I can to help him get reelected, to support him in Congress, and I just hope the voters agree that I'm the right choice. But I'm going to work as hard as I can right now, getting my message out through podcasts like this and other ways, social media, at a time when there aren't events to go to, and if I was knocking on people's doors, they wouldn't be answering anyway. But we've got a primary election on July 7th. I hope if you're a Republican, you vote and vote for me. And then definitely in November, there could not be a starker difference between me and Annie Kim. And I'm looking forward to hopefully the great honor of serving the people of the 3rd District in Congress.
Awesome. Well, David, it's definitely been a pleasure having you on the show here. If you have any opinions about this show, you want to leave any comments below, it'd be greatly appreciated. And with that, thank you very much for watching.
Thank you.